tell you what, Bible math is extremely difficult because we don't know dates. We might know ages, but most of the time those ages are recorded and they're of only the men. So, so doing something like what I've been doing for the past year, writing a script based on the Exodus story, um, it makes it really difficult because without the exact years, without exactly knowing what dynasty in Egyptian, as far as Egyptian goes, that what dynasty that Joseph came to Egypt under, not knowing the exact pharaoh makes it hard to know exactly what date, which means it makes it hard to know what is 64 years to Moses' birth from Joseph's death at 110. Because we do know that. We do know that Joseph is 110 when he dies. And we do know that it's about 64 years from his death to Moses' birth. Do we know what year Joseph died? Not to my knowledge, not in any of my research. Yeah, there's probably a lot of commentators out there that I could use that probably speculate, and that's what I'm going off of is someone's, I can't remember if it was a commentator or just or or a biblical historian, but someone suggested that maybe he came during the 12th dynasty because there was proof, later on down the road, there's proof that there was a worldwide famine, and it was within, the 12th dynasty. And um, a lot of it's gonna be, if you're doing a story based on a story that's already written and a story that has stuff like that missing, it's gonna be a lot of um artistic leeway, because yeah, you can do a lot of research and get one person saying one thing, another person saying one thing, and then that leaves you choosing which person to go with. Well, do you go with person A who says, so and so was born at this point in time and this is the reason why? Or you go with person B who says, well, so and so was born at this point in time because of this, that, and the other. Well, that's kind of where I'm at with like the birth of Moses and how old his parents were when he was born. I had a person over here in my research saying, well, just this year, because I couldn't find exactly where I found my original not my original goings with, I guess, my original information. So I had a person this year was saying, well, yeah, it's possible that Moses' mother was still within bearing age. Well, bearing age for that time was probably anywhere between, a teenager. I'm not, for them, it's probably around, for the ancient Israelites, it's probably a girl around 14 to no younger than 14 to no older than 16 when they get married. So 14 to 16 to about 49. Or depending on the woman, depends on it when they get to that point in life where naturally it becomes impossible for them to become pregnant. But and then, like I said, last year I had found some information that someone has said, oh, she was probably 100 and something years old, 100 plus years old, and that's why it was such a miraculous event that, this child was born to this woman who was, this, that, oh, she was definitely past the age to be able to bear a child. So, when I started writing my script based on his story, I went with person B, the info I found last year that said that his mother was, I I didn't set her at over 100. I think I might have put her around. I took that age to kind of figure out how old she was. The year she was born. But I think I put her around 75 originally. Yeah, that's still biologically nowadays impossible for a woman to get pregnant. But then, in the Bible time, before everything that we know now, don't get me wrong, these women were not superhuman. They were all, for all factors, human. So yes, they still went through that special womanly change where they're unable to have kids anymore. But there were those select few women who, for whatever reason, because God moved within them, they were able to bear kids past the what is logically and biologically impossible. Sarah was at least 90 when she had Isaac. Isaac is 60 when his son Esau and Jacob are born. So his wife Rebecca was probably, if she was younger than Isaac, she was probably, I don't know, somewhere in her 50s to maybe her 60s. We don't know. And then there's women who try to get pregnant and can't get pregnant, and eventually, because God moves, do get pregnant, like Rachel, Joseph's mother. For years she was unable to get pregnant, and finally does only after her husband Jacob has 10 sons by 3 other women. Of course, those sons are broken up. Rachel's sister Leah had so many sons, and Jacob's concubines, his wife's maids, had so many sons to equal the total of 10 sons by the time Joseph comes around. And then, of course, Rachel dies giving birth to Benjamin, the 12th son. But the point is, when you have people who take the time to research this stuff, to write their story, to write a script, and everything, you can't, and I know it's hard to not do this, you can't get hung up on the factor, oh, they shouldn't have done that. They made this woman, way too old. She can't, this woman is biologically impossible. It's impossible for her to get pregnant. Well, yeah, naturally speaking, yeah, it is. And yeah, they are humans. But it's the Bible. Simple explanation. It's the Bible. You're talking about a book that has so many examples of women who are well past their bearing the proved age to get pregnant, they get pregnant and have a kid. One's 90, one's 70. Jesus' mom, Mary, she was a virgin. She had never had sex. And yet, because of God, she had a kid before she even got with her husband, Joseph. 90-year-old Sarah has a son. The barren Rachel had 2 kids. Rebecca had twin boys, and both Rebecca and Isaac watched their sons grow into men. And well, although by this time Jacob was with his uncle, but basically his parents were alive to see them get married, or at least one of them get married and see grandkids. At least, like I said, at least one of them. Jacob lived long enough to see generations of grandkids before he died. Same with Joseph, generations of grandkids before he died at 110. The thing is, we don't know how old Moses' mother was, but through research and through creative leeway, if I choose to make her biologically past bearing age, you gotta get over that. It's the Bible. We're not dealing with nowadays. We're not dealing with, we're not dealing with nowadays biologics. We're not dealing with logic. If we were, then you wouldn't have Israel. That's just as simple as that. You would not. You would not have had Moses having to lead Israel out of Egypt because someone sat there and they got too logical. Well, she can't have been that age. She could not have been 75. She could not have been 50. She could not have been da-da-da-da-da-da. Oh, the truth is, yeah, she could. She could have been that age. We just don't know. We don't know how old Amram was, Moses' father was, when he married Moses' mother Jochebed. We don't know how old he was. We don't know how old she was. Although I'd say he was about 137 when he died, I think, according to the Bible. And I think there's about 7 years in between them. 7, I think. So she was about 130 when she died. So based on that, you can get he was probably about 7 when she was born. And to think that he waits long enough for her to come of an age to where he's allowed to marry her says something. Because she could have been a teenager when he married her, but something could have happened to where it was years later before Miriam came along. We know it was 7 years. Moses came 7 years after Miriam, because Miriam is 127 when she dies, because Moses is 120 when he dies. And Aaron comes along 3 years after Miriam. So we do know some ages, but you can't get caught up in logic. You can't get caught up in comparing that time with this time. The truth is, the Bible time isn't 2019. It was a different time. It was a time when women who could have been in their 70s looked like they were still in their 20s. You know, they still were beautiful and desirable. You know, Bruce, Sarah had two kings who wanted her. Same with Rebecca, I believe. Uh, just the point is, don't compare Bible times with our times now. Because if you do, you're going to sit there and ruin someone's hard work. All that time they spent on research. You're going to ruin it by getting too logical, getting too literal. I guess is getting too literal, getting just saying, well, you can't do that. Yeah, they can. They sit there and spend the time researching it. And they spend all those headache hours trying to figure out the math. They can. If they're gonna sit there and take a story that was already written, and yeah, it's missing a lot of information that we probably don't really need, that would need because it would be helpful in writing the story. Leave it alone. You're given something to go over, to correct spelling, to correct whatever, not to correct their math, not to correct the information they've gathered, not to correct their research. If someone gives you a story that is based on a Bible story, and you see that they've made a woman an age that's well past, logically speaking, way past the time for a woman to be able to bear a child, leave it. Because, truth be told, they probably spent hours getting a headache doing all that math, trying to figure out, okay, how old was this person? Okay, this is what I know and this is what I don't know. Once they figure out about how old, about the year, just leave it. Don't sit there and get logical. Don't get literal. Don't start comparing that time with our time. Just don't. Don't do it. Because it's already enough of a headache to do it. To do what that person's doing in the first place.